Hello, cadets. My name is Jessica Gonzalez, and I am a program specialist at our Holyoke Leadership Center. This week, we're going to work toward our Special Agent badge. And in order to do that, together, we're going to work on learning how to fingerprint and why fingerprinting is so important. So if you've ever watched a crime TV show or read a book about an investigator or forensic scientist, fingerprinting is incredibly important. It allows us to try to compare the fingerprints found at the scene to potential suspects in the crime. Now, every person's fingerprints are completely individual, so my fingerprints might look similar to yours or might have similar features, but they're definitely different, which is how investigators and police officers are able to identify, by the way of looking at someone's fingerprints, who may have been the one to commit the crime. Because every person's fingerprints are completely unique to them, which makes fingerprinting actually a really incredibly fascinating science. So, we're going to try some fingerprinting of our own. We are going to need the following. We're going to need a pencil, some colored highlighters, white paper. I would suggest having a couple pieces of white paper because we are going to need a couple pieces. Wide clear tape. I would suggest using packing tape or something similar like Scotch tape, just as long as it's clear and you can very clearly see through it. A small notebook would be good if you want to record your findings in a notebook. You do not have to, but I know as many of us have seen on TV or in a book, read about in a book, a lot of detectives always have a notebook with them. It's good to write your observations down. Magnifying glass. So if you have one of these at home, that's great. It'll just help you get a closer look at what your fingerprints actually look like. But if you don't have one, you can certainly see pretty clearly what your fingerprints look like without it. All right, so we're going to get started. So we're going to start with a white piece of paper. And what I want you to start with is tracing the outline of your hand print, okay? So let's start with putting our hand on the piece of paper, and we want to make sure we get a full outline. Doesn't have to be perfect, but want to make sure we have plenty of space because we're going to record some other information as well. All right, this is what mine looks like. There we go. Perfect. All right, so now that we have this taken care of, we're now going to move on to the next step. So the next step is going to be, we need to take a separate piece of white paper, okay, and we are literally just going to make a scribble mark on here. Make sure it's dark enough that if you were to press your finger onto it, it would like the coloring would stick, okay? So let's see how well I can do here. All right, so I made my scribble. Perfect. All righty. Now, we're going to start with our pinky finger. It can be either hand, whichever hand you use to trace, okay? So, we're going to try to press our pinky finger down against the patch of the scribble, okay? So you want your fingerprint to be really pressed down strong enough so that it can pick up on that coloring, okay? Now, we don't just want the tip of our finger. We want actually this whole little piece here, almost like if you were thinking about the palm of your hand, kind of the palm of that top of your fingertip, okay? So we're going to take our finger front, and we're going to press it down into the scribble. Now, it's really important if you want to get a better picture of what your fingerprint looks like to kind of twist your finger back and forth. Okay, that'll help you get the most coloring on your finger, and it will also help you to get a little bit clearer picture. Okay, all right, so your fingerprint should look pretty dusty at this point. Now, you're going to take a piece of clear tape, okay? All right, we're going to use the sticky side. You're going to place it over your fingerprint, and you want to press pretty tight because you really want that fingerprint to transfer to the tape so you can get a really clear picture. Okay. All right, so let's just press that a little bit. All right, now once you remove the tape, there should be a dark circle where your fingerprint was, okay? So mine, it's a little hard to see. You'll probably be able to see it better on your own, but my fingerprint's right in the middle here. So I'm just gonna place this on my little stencil here of my hand, and I'm gonna put it right where the pinky finger would be. If you wanna kind of like turn the tape around so that it'll stick to your paper, that's also an option. Just be careful not to damage the fingerprint because you want to be able to look at that later. Okay, should look like this. Now I want you to take the next step and do all of your fingerprints that way. So same process, take the scribble, take each of your fingers, press them against it, make sure you're moving your finger back and forth to really get the coloring on there, and then transfer it to the tape and put it on your handprint. Once you do all of your fingerprints, you're then going to examine all of your different prints. So each of your fingers might actually have a slightly different appearance to the actual fingerprint, which is interesting because we all have like this completely unique set of fingerprints. So you can kind of see mine a little, but if you look closer, especially with a magnifying glass, or if you get really up close, maybe even a phone camera, if you don't have a magnifying glass, might be super helpful. So the closer you look, you're going to be able to see perhaps some swirls or some arches. So there's actually a couple different things you might see. So wavy and curly lines, are classified as arches. So that's one descriptive way that you can look at what you're seeing. Loops and whorls, WHORLS, are also a way to refer to those appearances on your fingerprint. Arches look like little miniature mountains. Loops enter from one side of the finger before curving back and exiting on the same side. So it's kind of like this, okay? And whorls look like circles. So you might see any of these on your fingerprints, which is why it's so cool to really study them. So what I'd like you to do once you have your fingerprints, all of them on here, you're going to take your magnifying glass, and you can kind of see mine a little. And you're going to look to really see what sort of shapes and arches and loops and whorls you can find in your fingerprints. How are your fingerprints different from your other fingers? What do they look like? What sets them apart? What I want you to do with your highlighter is then to use whichever colors you want. One can represent arches, one can represent loops, one can represent whorls, whichever color you'd like. And I just want you to kind of, not necessarily on the fingerprint, but maybe next to it, just like point an arrow with your highlighter where you see a certain type of design. So it might end up looking something like this, pointing to those different shapes that you see. Now, once you're done with yours, I would like you to then try this with a family member or a friend. You can even do this virtually with your troop and then hold it up so that everyone can see those differences, because it's pretty neat to compare, especially to family members, to see how similar your fingerprints are. You won't necessarily have the same fingerprints, of course, because everyone's are individual. However, sometimes family members can have very similar ones, which can also help in an investigation. Maybe they find one person who didn't do the crime but might be connected to who did. So there's a lot of cool science here. I encourage you to keep practicing taking your fingerprints. Take your family's fingerprints. Promise them they're not in trouble. It's just to have a little fun and test out this science. So I hope you enjoy this activity, and I hope you enjoy earning your Special Agent badge. It's a great badge. It's very exciting, and I encourage you to keep exploring and investigating.